Wife got pregnant while best friend stayed with us. But I secretly had a vasectomy years ago. I thought I had it all figured out. For years, life seemed perfect. I had a great career, a nice house, a beautiful wife, Sarah, and my best friend Carl, who'd been with me through thick and thin since our college days. We were a tight trio, always had each other's backs. I used to joke that nothing could shake our little world. But man, life has a way of sneaking up and smacking you when you least expect it. It all kicked off a little over 6 months ago. Carl hit a real rough patch, lost his job, and was in the middle of a brutal divorce. You'd think, knowing what I know now, that would have been my first clue something was wrong. But no, back then, I just thought, this is what friends do. So I told him, hey man, don't sweat it. We've got a spare room. Stay as long as you need. Sarah wasn't totally on board at first. She kind of hesitated, gave me this weird look. I remember her saying, are you sure it's a good idea to have him living with us? I mean, it's going to be a lot. But I brushed her off. Didn't think much of it. I figured she was just being practical, like maybe it'd be awkward with Carl around all the time. But come on, this was Carl, the guy who helped me move into this house. He was practically family. Yeah, it'll be fine, I said. He just needs a little time, and we can help him get back on his feet. He's been there for us before. She nodded, but didn't look happy about it. I should have paid more attention to that. But hindsight's 20/20ths, right? So Carl moved in. At first, things were pretty normal. He spent most of his time in his room, job hunting and dealing with his divorce crap. I wasn't too involved in all that, just tried to be a supportive friend. Meanwhile, Sarah and I went about our usual routine. You know, work, dinner, watching TV, all the regular stuff. But after a couple of weeks, I started to notice some changes. Sarah seemed distant, like her mind was somewhere else, even when we were together. I'd come home and she'd be quieter than usual, or she'd disappear into the kitchen without saying much. Carl, on the other hand, was starting to hang around more. He'd sit on the couch, chatting with Sarah while I cooked or whatever. It wasn't a big deal at first, just kind of different. I figured she was just stressed. I mean, having a guest in the house isn't always easy. And Carl was going through his own drama, so I didn't think much of it. Besides, Sarah and I had always been solid. We'd been married for 4 years by that point, and everything seemed great. Then came the bombshell. Well, no, not going to use that word. Let's just say it was a shock. One night, after I'd gotten home from a long day at work, Sarah was practically glowing. I remember her standing in the kitchen, a big smile on her face, and she walked up to me, wrapped her arms around my neck and said, I've got some amazing news. I thought maybe she got a promotion or something, so I played along. What's up? I asked. I'm pregnant, she said, beaming like it was the best thing in the world. My heart just stopped, completely froze. Now here's the kicker. Wait, no, not using that. The thing is, I'd had a vasectomy years ago. Before Sarah and I got married, I decided I didn't want kids. There was some family stuff on my side, genetic issues that I didn't want to pass on. So, I made that decision without telling anyone. Not Sarah, not Carl, not anyone. It was something I planned to mention eventually, but there never seemed to be a good time. So, yeah, that baby? There was no way it was mine. But instead of saying anything, I just smiled and hugged her back. I played it off like I was excited. That's great, honey, I said, while inside I was screaming. How far along are you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. About 6 weeks, she said, totally oblivious to what was going on in my head. 6 weeks. That was right around the time Carl had moved in. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. Everything was clicking into place. The way she'd been acting distant, Carl hanging around more, her sudden excitement about being pregnant. It all made sense. But I wasn't ready to confront it. Not yet. I started watching them, like really paying attention to their little interactions. I'd catch Sarah and Carl having these weird, quiet conversations when they thought I wasn't listening. They'd share these inside jokes that I didn't get, and sometimes I'd walk into a room and they'd just stop talking, like I'd interrupted something. At first I thought maybe I was being paranoid. I mean, Carl was my best friend, and Sarah was my wife. There's no way they'd do something like that to me, right? But then, one night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen when they thought I'd gone to bed. We need to be more careful, Sarah whispered. He's starting to get suspicious. Carl's voice was low and tense. Maybe we should just tell him. It's not fair to keep this up. No, Sarah snapped. Not yet. We need more time. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, my heart racing. I knew something was going on, but I didn't have the full picture. I needed proof. The next morning, I went out and bought some hidden cameras. Yeah, it sounds extreme, but I wasn't going to confront them without solid evidence. I installed the cameras in the common areas of the house, the kitchen, the living room, even the hallway outside Carl's room. I told myself I was doing it to protect myself. to know for sure if what I suspected was true. Then I went a step further. I used some of my IT skills that I normally use for work to get into Sarah's phone. I wasn't proud of it, but I had to know what was going on. And that's when I found the texts. Messages between her and Carl, talking about keeping it quiet and not wanting to hurt me. That was the moment it all became real. Over the next few days, I kept gathering evidence. I'd watch them on the cameras, see them getting closer when they thought I wasn't around. There were more texts, more little moments that made my stomach turn. It was like I was living in a nightmare. And the worst part was, I had to pretend everything was fine. I had to act like the happy husband while knowing that the two people I trusted most were betraying me behind my back. And that was just the beginning. After everything I had found, you'd think I would have gone off the deep end and just confronted them right there. But no, I decided to be patient. Too patient, honestly. I figured if I was going to blow up my whole life, I might as well make sure I had every single piece of proof first. I wanted them to squirm, to know they'd been caught with no way out. I started noticing more little things that I hadn't paid attention to before, like how Carl and Sarah would always manage to be in the same room whenever I wasn't around. If I was in the living room, they'd find some reason to be in the kitchen. If I was upstairs, suddenly they'd be downstairs chatting or watching TV. It was like they were drawn to each other, and I was just the extra in the background of my own life. The texts between them were getting bolder too. I saw Carl sending these late-night messages like, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow," or "Wish we didn't have to sneak around." And Sarah would reply with crap like, "Just a little longer," or "We have to be careful, he's smart." I had to laugh at that one. Smart? Clearly not smart enough if this had been happening right under my nose. One night, I stayed up late, pretending to be asleep in bed while I watched them on the cameras. It was around 11 p.m. when I caught them sitting on the couch together. They weren't all over each other or anything, but it was just off. Carl was sitting way too close, his arm on the back of the couch behind her head. Sarah was leaning in, like she was totally comfortable with him being in her space. I could barely watch without wanting to throw something, but I held back. I wanted to see what else they'd do when they thought I wasn't paying attention. I needed more. The worst part was, even when I saw them being too close for comfort, it wasn't like they were full-on hooking up or anything. It was always this weird, almost intimate energy that made my skin crawl. I think that made it even harder because I couldn't just yell, "Gotcha!" and end it. I needed something bigger. I started logging everything. Every time they were alone together, every conversation I overheard, every weird text. My phone became this secret journal where I documented their movements like I was tracking a crime. I felt sick half the time, but I just couldn't stop. Things got more intense when Sarah started talking more about the baby. She'd bring up stuff like nursery colors or how she was feeling, and I'd nod along, pretending to care while inside I was screaming. She even asked me if Carl could help paint the nursery when the time came. The audacity, man. I couldn't believe it. I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Inside, though, I was dying. The next big moment came one Saturday afternoon. I had told Sarah I was going to run some errands, but really, I just drove around the neighborhood for a bit, parking down the street so I could watch the camera feeds. I wanted to see what would happen when I wasn't supposed to be home. Sure enough, within 15 minutes, Carl and Sarah were together again, sitting on the couch. This time, it was different. Sarah was lying down, her head resting on Carl's lap. He was stroking her hair like it was the most natural thing in the world. They weren't saying much, just sitting there in this disgusting, cozy silence. It hit me right then that this wasn't some fling or a one-time mistake. This was a full-on relationship. They were comfortable, like they'd been doing this for ages. I watched, feeling this mix of anger and sadness hit me like a truck. I wanted to storm in, to scream at both of them, to throw Carl out of my house. But once again, I didn't. I just let it simmer inside me, watching them like I was some kind of ghost in my own life. At that point, I knew I had enough to confront them. But I still wasn't ready. I kept telling myself I needed one final piece, one big thing that would seal the deal, and I wouldn't have to hear any excuses. So, I waited. I watched. I let it build. A few days later, I finally caught the moment I'd been waiting for. It was a Monday morning, and I had taken the day off work, telling Sarah I was sick. She said she'd be out running some errands, and Carl left for a job interview. I figured this would be a slow day, nothing much happening. But later that afternoon, Carl came back early, and instead of going straight to his room like he usually did, he headed into our bedroom, Sarah's and mine. My stomach dropped. I quickly pulled up the camera feed on my phone. There they were, in the bedroom, talking in hushed voices. Sarah wasn't even back yet, but Carl was rummaging through the drawers like he owned the place. He picked up one of Sarah's sweaters, holding it to his face for a second. I felt like I was going to puke. And then it happened. Sarah came home. She walked into the bedroom and they immediately embraced. It wasn't just a hug either. It was way more than that. Carl pulled her close, kissed her neck, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, giggling softly, like it was no big deal. And then, they kissed. That was it. I couldn't watch anymore. I turned off the feed, my hands shaking. It felt like everything I had been holding on to, any tiny shred of hope that maybe, just maybe I was wrong, completely shattered. I had the proof now, and there was no going back. I sat there in silence for what felt like hours, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. Should I just barge in and kick Carl out? Should I confront Sarah first? My mind was racing, but I knew one thing. This couldn't go on any longer. The worst part of all of this was that they thought they were being so careful, like I wouldn't notice them slipping into my room together, like I wouldn't see the obvious connection between the pregnancy and Carl's convenient timing. They thought they had me fooled. But the thing is, I was just waiting for the right moment to drop the bomb on them. I made a plan. I was going to confront them both at the same time, in the same room, with all the evidence I had gathered. There would be no way for them to lie their way out of it. I wanted to see the look on their faces when I told them I knew everything. Every sneaky glance, every stolen kiss, every damn text message. I spent the next few days getting ready. I backed up all the footage, organized the texts, made sure everything was in order. I even wrote out what I was going to say in my head, practicing the moment over and over. I wasn't going to let them off easy. And when the time came, I knew I had them right where I wanted them. Update 1. So there I was, sitting in the living room, feeling like I was about to rip the Band-Aid off of a wound that had been festering for months. I knew today was going to be the day. I had everything lined up, footage, screenshots of texts, all of it. I was done with the games, done pretending I didn't know what was happening under my own roof. Sarah and Carl didn't know what was coming. It was Friday evening, and we were all supposed to have dinner together. Classic family-style stuff. Except this wasn't going to be a normal dinner. It was going to be the last meal we ever shared as this twisted little trio. I made sure I got home early to set the stage. I didn't want to look frantic or suspicious, so I kept it chill. Made some pasta, set the table, acted like everything was just another night. But inside, I was boiling. Every time I thought about what I'd seen, Carl in our room, Sarah with him, the way they looked at each other, I felt like I could explode. But I had to keep my cool just a little longer. Carl got home first. He walked in with his usual, "Hey man," acting like nothing was wrong. I forced a smile and nodded, telling him dinner would be ready soon. I watched him out of the corner of my eye as he went to his room to drop his stuff off. It was weird, knowing what I knew, and seeing him act like everything was normal. It was almost funny, in a messed up kind of way. Sarah came home a little later, all smiles like she hadn't just spent the last few months sneaking around behind my back. "Smells great," she said, leaning in to give me a quick kiss on the cheek. I had to stop myself from flinching. Dinner was tense, though neither of them seemed to notice it at first. We sat there, eating in awkward silence, and I waited for the right moment. Sarah tried to make small talk, asking how my day was and if I had any plans for the weekend. I gave short answers, just enough to keep things moving, but not enough to really engage. Carl, on the other hand, seemed more relaxed. He was cracking jokes, talking about how he might have landed a new job and how things were finally looking up. I couldn't believe the nerve of this guy. Sitting there, talking about his future while he was ruining mine. And then, it happened. Sarah reached for my hand across the table, probably noticing I wasn't my usual self. "Is everything okay, honey? You've been kind of quiet lately." That was my cue. I pulled my hand away, staring at her, then at Carl, before saying, "No, everything's not okay. In fact, things are about as far from okay as they could possibly be." Carl's smile faded instantly, and he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sarah's eyes went wide, a look of concern spreading across her face. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaky. I took a deep breath, trying to stay as calm as possible. "How long?" I said, looking directly at both of them. "How long have you two been sneaking around behind my back?" Sarah froze. For a split second, she didn't react, but then she shook her head, like she couldn't believe what I was saying. "What? What are you talking about?" Carl, on the other hand, started to stammer, "Man, I don't..." But I cut him off. "Don't even try to deny it. I snapped, my voice rising. I know everything. I've seen the texts, the videos, all of it. I pulled out my phone and tapped on one of the videos I'd saved. The one where they were sitting in the bedroom together, Carl's hand on her belly. I held it up so they could both see. Sarah's face turned white and her hand flew to her mouth. Carl just sat there, staring at the screen, completely frozen. Sarah started crying. "It's not what you think," she sobbed. "We didn't mean for this to happen." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Not what I think? Really? You're going to tell me you didn't mean to sneak around behind my back? To betray me in my own house? Give me a break, Sarah." Carl finally spoke up, his voice low and shaky. "I'm sorry, man. I never wanted this. We just fell in love." "Fell in love?" I repeated, incredulous. "That's your excuse? You fell in love? And what, I'm just supposed to be okay with that? After everything I've done for you, Carl? I let you live here. I helped you when you had nothing. And this is how you repay me?" Carl hung his head, unable to meet my gaze. I know, I messed up. I never wanted to hurt you." "Hurt me?" I shouted, finally losing it. "You've done more than hurt me. You've destroyed everything." Sarah was still crying, trying to reach for me, but I pulled back. I couldn't even stand to look at her. "We were going to tell you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We just didn't know how." "Tell me what? That you've been sleeping with my best friend? That the baby you're carrying isn't mine?" Sarah looked up at me, confusion in her eyes. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. "Sarah," I said, my voice low, "there's no way that baby could be mine. I had a vasectomy years ago." The room went dead silent. Sarah's tears stopped, and she just stared at me like she couldn't process what I just said. Carl looked like he was about to be sick. "But how? Why didn't you tell me?" she stammered. I shrugged, feeling strangely calm now that everything was out in the open. I was scared. Scared of passing on bad genes. Scared of commitment. Scared of a lot of things. But that doesn't matter now, does it? Because you clearly didn't care enough to be honest with me either. Carl stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I need some air," he muttered, heading for the door. "Oh no, you don't," I said, blocking his path. "You're not running away from this. We're going to sit here and talk this out like adults." And that's exactly what we did. For hours, we sat in that tense, broken room, picking apart everything. Every lie, every betrayal, every excuse. Sarah admitted she had felt something missing in our marriage for a while, and Carl had filled that void. Carl confessed that he knew it was wrong, but didn't know how to stop. By the time we were done, we were all emotionally drained. Carl packed up his stuff and left that night, promising to give us space to figure things out. Sarah retreated to the guest room, leaving me alone in what felt like the emptiest house I'd ever been in. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Update 2. So after Carl packed his bags and left, it was just me and Sarah in the house, except it didn't really feel like home anymore. It was just this empty shell of what our life used to be. Everything looked the same, the pictures on the walls, the furniture we picked out together, but it all felt wrong, like I was living in someone else's life. The next morning, I woke up feeling completely drained. I hadn't slept much, obviously. How could I, knowing everything I knew now? I lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, trying to wrap my head around what had happened. It felt like I was in some kind of bad dream, but this was my reality now. Sarah was still in the guest room. I could hear her moving around, but she didn't come out to say anything. And honestly, I was fine with that. I wasn't ready to deal with her yet. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. By lunchtime, she finally came out. She looked rough, like she hadn't slept either. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she kept avoiding my gaze. "We need to talk," she said quietly, sitting down at the kitchen table. I nodded, sitting across from her. "Yeah, we do." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling a little as she folded them in front of her. "I'm so sorry," she started. "I never wanted to hurt you like this. It just happened." I stared at her for a moment, feeling this wave of anger rise up inside me. "It just happened?" I repeated, my voice tight. "Sarah, you didn't just trip and fall into an affair with my best friend. You made a choice." She flinched at that, but I didn't care. I wasn't about to make this easier for her. "I know," she whispered, tears filling her eyes again. "I know I messed up. I never meant for it to get this far. Carl was just... I don't know. He was there when you weren't." I felt my jaw clench. "What the hell does that mean?" She wiped her eyes, sniffling. "I don't know how to explain it. You've always been so... distant. Ever since we got married, it's like you've had one foot out the door. I didn't feel like we were really connecting anymore, and Carl, he noticed. He listened. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Yeah, we hadn't been perfect. But was it really that bad? I had no idea she felt like this. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. Not even close. So, what? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Instead of talking to me about it, you decided to cheat on me? You thought that would solve things? She shook her head. No, I didn't think. I was stupid, I was lonely, and Carl was there, and one thing led to another. I put my hand up, stopping her. I don't want to hear any more excuses. The fact is, you had an affair with my best friend. You lied to me for months, and you let me believe that baby was mine. Sarah looked like she was about to collapse from guilt. I didn't know how to tell you, she cried. I was going to, I swear, I didn't know how. I stood up, pacing the kitchen. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what the next step was. I could feel the anger building again, but I didn't want to explode on her. I needed to stay calm. This was already a disaster, and I didn't want to make it worse. I don't know how we move forward from this, Sarah, I finally said, turning to face her. I don't even know if I want to. You and Carl, this wasn't some fling. You made the choice to betray me over and over again. And that baby? You let me believe it was mine. How the hell do you come back from that? She was crying hard now, her face buried in her hands. I don't know, she sobbed. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can. I leaned against the counter, running a hand through my hair. I need time to think, I said quietly. This isn't something I can just forgive and forget. I need space. Sarah nodded, wiping her tears. I understand. We didn't talk much after that. I stayed out of the house as much as I could, just driving around, walking through the park, trying to clear my head. Every time I thought about what had happened, it felt like a fresh wound opening up again. The betrayal was so deep it was hard to even function sometimes. I'd find myself staring off into space, just reliving the moment I found out over and over again. About a week later, I started talking to a lawyer. I didn't know if divorce was what I really wanted, but I needed to be prepared for whatever came next. Sarah and I were still in the same house, but we barely spoke. It was like we were strangers living together, pretending everything was fine when it was anything but. One night, Sarah knocked on my bedroom door, my bedroom, because I'd moved into the guest room after Carl left. She stood in the doorway looking nervous. What is it? I asked, not in the mood for another heavy conversation. I'm thinking about moving out, she said softly. I think it's what's best. For both of us. I wasn't expecting that, but at the same time it made sense. We couldn't keep living like this, tiptoeing around each other in a house that was filled with so much tension. Where will you go? I asked. My sister's for now, she replied. Just until I figure things out. I nodded. Okay, maybe that's for the best. The next few days were strange, watching her pack up her stuff, knowing she was leaving, but not really feeling any relief. Part of me thought I'd feel better once she was gone, but it didn't. It just felt final. Like the life we had built together was officially over, and there was no going back. When she finally left, the house was dead silent. No more footsteps in the hall, no more awkward conversations. Just me, alone. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty room, wondering how the hell my life had come to this. I knew I had a long road ahead of me. I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk it, but I didn't have much choice. This was my new reality, and I had to figure out how to move forward. Because no matter how much I wished it hadn't happened, there was no undoing what Sarah and Carl had done. All I could do now was decide what kind of life I wanted to build next, without them. Update 3. After Sarah left, you'd think things would feel less tense, like I'd finally be able to breathe again. But the truth is, the silence was worse. I was just sitting there, alone in a house that now felt way too big and way too empty. Everything reminded me of what happened. The photos, the bed, the way the sunlight came through the window at the exact spot where I'd caught them together. It was like I couldn't escape it. At first, I thought I'd just dive into work. It seemed like the easiest way to distract myself. But no matter how many projects I took on, no matter how many hours I spent at the office, it didn't stop my mind from wandering back to the same questions over and over again. How did I not see this coming? What could I have done differently? Was this my fault? And then, there was the whole thing with Carl. It wasn't just that I lost my wife. I lost my best friend too. A guy I trusted for years, someone I thought would always have my back. That betrayal hit me just as hard, if not harder. Every time I looked at my phone, I'd see his number, his texts from before, and it would bring back this flood of anger. But also sadness, because no matter what, I still missed having him around. It's messed up, I know, but that's how it was. The thing is, I didn't really know what to do with all that anger. I'm not the type to go smashing stuff or screaming at the top of my lungs, so instead it just kind of sat there, simmering. Every now and then, I'd catch myself imagining what I could have said, what I could have done differently during that confrontation. Maybe I should have punched him. Maybe I should have yelled at Sarah more. But in the end, it didn't matter. The damage was done, and nothing was going to change that. A couple of weeks passed, and I realized I couldn't keep living in the same house. It was just too much. Every time I walked through the door, it felt like I was stepping back into that nightmare. So I made the decision to sell the place. I thought it'd be harder, like I'd be too attached to it or something. But honestly, once I made the call, I felt this weird sense of relief. Like getting rid of the house was the first step toward getting rid of all the crap that came with it. I spent a few days packing up everything, deciding what to keep and what to toss. It was actually kind of cathartic, going through old photos, old memories, and deciding what was worth holding on to. I threw away a lot, more than I thought I would. I didn't want reminders of a life that wasn't real anymore. Eventually, I found a new place. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small apartment across town. It felt strange downsizing, but at the same time, it was a fresh start. No memories tied to this place. No ghosts of Carl or Sarah lurking around every corner. Just me, my stuff, and a clean slate. Once I moved in, I realized I needed to focus on myself for a bit. I'd spent so much time caught up in the drama, trying to figure out what went wrong, that I kind of lost track of who I was without all that. So I started doing things I hadn't done in a long time. Things I actually enjoyed. I picked up old hobbies, started going to the gym more, reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in forever because I was so wrapped up in my life with Sarah. The thing about going through something like this is that it forces you to reevaluate everything. You start to question every decision you made, every relationship you have. But after a while, I realized it wasn't about blaming myself anymore. Sure, I wasn't perfect. Maybe I should have been more present. Maybe I could have communicated better. But at the end of the day, Sarah and Carl made their choices. They chose to betray me, and that's on them. I think the biggest thing I learned through all of this was that I had to let go of the anger. Holding on to it wasn't doing me any good. It was just keeping me stuck in this cycle of frustration and pain. So little by little, I worked on letting it go. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but eventually, I got to a place where I didn't feel that constant weight on my chest anymore. And then there was the baby. That was a whole other layer of pain. Knowing that Sarah was having Carl's kid, that the life we were supposed to build together was gone, it hurt in ways I can't even describe. But again, there was nothing I could do to change that. I had to accept it and move on. I couldn't be stuck mourning a future that was never going to happen. Months went by, and I started to feel like myself again. Not the same person I was before all this happened, but maybe a better version of myself. Stronger, more aware of what I wanted and what I deserved. I started setting boundaries with people, not letting anyone take advantage of my kindness or my trust anymore. It felt good to reclaim control of my life. Sarah tried reaching out a couple of times after she moved out, but I didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say. She made her choices, and I wasn't interested in reopening those wounds. As for Carl, he didn't even bother trying. I guess he knew there was no coming back from what he did. One day, I got a call from one of our mutual friends, saying that Carl and Sarah were still together, trying to make a go of it as a couple. I didn't feel anything when I heard that. No anger, no sadness, just indifference. They were someone else's problem now. Looking back, it's crazy how much my life changed in such a short amount of time. But I think in the end, it was for the best. I didn't deserve what they did to me. But I also didn't deserve to live in that toxic situation any longer than I had to. Now I'm focusing on the future, my future. I'm not sure what it holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. I'm not weighed down by secrets, lies, or betrayals anymore. I've got a clear path ahead, and that feels pretty damn good. So yeah, life threw me into a situation I never saw coming, but I came out on the other side. And if there's one thing I learned, it's that sometimes the hardest thing to do is the best thing for you. Letting go of people who hurt you, moving on, and choosing to live for yourself, that's where real strength comes from. And that's what I'm doing now, living for me.